thrown into prison and you were deprived of the Bible, what will you do? There's one book in the Bible if you want to memorize, which will help you through the prison time while you are alone. It will be the book of Romans. So many of the Old Testament saints, when they were looking at impending persecution, they memorized Romans because they were not allowed to take the Bible with them. They did not have any book with them. So they memorized Romans, all 16 chapters to memory, so that they could take Bible classes in the jail cells without any book, right? We don't know what lies ahead of us. So I would encourage you to memorize Romans full 16 chapters, no big deal. You can memorize a lot of cricket scores, so many years, right? And so many stories we memorize. So why not memorize Romans? So it will be very helpful and beneficial to us. Now the book of Romans has changed the course of Christendom over the last 20 centuries. You remember the man called Saint Augustine. He was living a very loose kind of life, and one day he was sitting in a garden crying as to what is thinking about his life, what a wicked kind of life that he was living. And suddenly he heard a young boy sing the song, "Read the book, read the book." Then he opened, he got Romans chapter 13. And from that he read about all the wickedness of his flesh. And he realized that that was enough to change his somewhere. One of the greatest theologians of Christendom is Saint Augustine. It affected his life and he got converted. Because 100 years later, there was a man by the name Martin Luther. Everyone knows about him, right? A strong Catholic man, right? And when he read Romans chapter 1, verse 16, 17, he was so gripped by the fact of God's righteousness that he started to ask questions. And that begins the Protestant Reformation. You might have heard about it, right? The history of Christendom, one of the turning points of modern Christianity or modern evangelical movement came from the life of this man called Martin Luther. There's another man by the name of John Wesley. He too, after reading the preface of Martin Luther to Romans, his heart was also strangely warmed. The conversion experience followed in his life. We know that how many lives were impacted by the ministry of John Wesley. So, this book of Romans, all Bible is inspired by God, but we see especially God used this book of Romans to touch the hearts of many people and change the course of many lives. So it is imperative for us to study it, to meditate on it, and to glean from it as the Spirit leads us. Alright, so there are a few things I would like to say. All of you take some notebook to write down these notes, because this is kind of not a preaching, it's kind of a study. How many of you go to the class without a notebook? Take down notes so that you can refer to it later and study from it. Now, when you study a book, right, you need to do a little bit of background to put this book in its context. Someone said, a text without a context is a pretext for the full test of a text. You put in wrong interpretation if you pull things out of context. So this letter is basically written to a particular people living in a particular time in a particular country, right? So if you don't understand the background to which this letter is written, you miss many major points. You may like few verses here and there, and you may take few verses here and there to prove your points, but you will not understand everything. Just an example, when we came to Andhra, we saw the context from which many of you came. We were able to understand you much better Because we saw your parents, we saw the place from which you came, we saw the churches that you went, we saw the people with whom you mingled, we were able to understand you a little better. So, in order to understand the meaning of the epistle, we need to understand the context. So, when I say context, first of all, this letter is written to the believers in Rome, right? At that time, we know there were these empires and this uh, great empires in the world. They were all mentioned also in the Bible, because when Bible chooses to write about certain things, there are two principles that are in question. Number one is the principle of selection. God does not put all history into the Bible. For example, we don't read about the Great Wall of China, right? We don't read about the Han dynasty of China or the India, the Buddha or the Saurashtra. It's not mentioned in the Bible. So God has selected certain events in history and put it in the Bible. That's the first principle that you need to know about. So if you want to replace all history with the Bible, we cannot. Right? So God has selected certain events from the history and put it on here. Second principle that we see regarding this is the principle of connection. Now, when he has selected certain events from history, he has connected these events together to one single important event. What is that? Jesus and the salvation of mankind through him. So, in one way or another, these events which are selected by the Lord is connected to how the most important event in history. What is that? Redemption of man. Redemption of man. Right? Through Christ, Jesus' Son, is connected. So when we read the Bible, though there are historical pieces there embedded into the Bible, we must always remember that God has selected these events so that it is connected to redemption. Now, when we talk about empires, the great prophet of the old, named Daniel, he saw a vision in Daniel chapter 2. You remember that great uh, statue in the book of Daniel? Now, I believe it's a good beginning to start with, because the people of Israel, they were in the strange land called Babylon. They were being taken captive because of their disobedience. They were captives in Babylon for 70 years. And during this exilic period, so 70 years of captivity, God in his mercy showed to this man Nebuchadnezzar this dream of this statue. And this Nebuchadnezzar king was not able to understand head or tail of what it is, right? What is this statue? What is this meaning of it? And then came Daniel trying to explain the statue, right? And what is the statue? Remember? Okay. Now, those of you who are not familiar with the portions, I would encourage you to do a Bible reading program. You don't have a Bible reading program, because I am mentioning things from here and there, and then it might sound Greek and Hebrew to you because you have never read those portions. Please go home and read those portions. So I'm just mentioning. So Daniel chapter 2. Now in that he saw a great statue, and then the head of the statue was gold, right? And what did that depict? The head, Babylonian. So this empire, which started off in AD 600, is that great empire, the Babylonian 612 to be precise. Now, what is an empire? BC 612. Now, what is an empire? Empire means, see, today we see many countries which are much more powerful, like America, right? Once upon a time, USSR, 1/6 of world land was occupied by the territories under that Soviet Union. But they were not empires. British, the sun never set the British Empire, they say. But they were not empires in that sense the Bible talks about it. Now, when the Bible talks about empire, it means there were no opposition to the rule in the known world. There were unknown worlds, but in the known world, there were no opposition to that great rule. So, Bible pictures Babylon as in that head, and one of the prime leaders or statesmen of that empire was this man called Nebuchadnezzar, right? So you see this the head of gold in chapter 2 verse 32 and verse 38, where Daniel is explaining about it. Then again in Daniel chapter 7, Babylon is mentioned as the first beast like a lion, right? So this man was so brutal and so overpowering, and he had absolute dictatorship, power over this empire. But in 586, they captured Judah, and the last king in that empire was this man called Belshazzar. You remember that handwriting on the wall? Mene, mene, tekel upharsin. God has weighed your kingdom, found it wanting, and given to maids and priests. The same night, this king was killed, and then Darius, the maid, started. So, exactly as Daniel has seen, the head was Babylon and the gold, but the full statue was not made of gold. That means Babylon's empire was not going to continue. Now, who can mention this? Who can tell this? Some people, when they come to power, you know what they say? I am going to be the king for ever and ever. God puts boundaries and says, that's it. And after that, the second kingdom was mentioned. Which was the second kingdom? The Medes and the Persians, right? In the beginning, the kingdom of Medes was stronger, but when it came later, Persians took over. You remember the king called Cyrus, who decreed that the Jews may be brought back. So their kingdom was 200. So the Babylonian Empire lasted for 63 years. Okay? And the Persian Empire, the Medo-Persian Empire, started at 549 BC, and it lasted for 213 years. So Cyrus, one of the most powerful kingdoms, it spanned 3 continents. They are also mentioned in Daniel chapter 7 as the second beast, which is like a bear. The first was like a lion, the second beast was like a bear. Now again we see about Medo-Persians in Daniel chapter 8, verse 3 and 4. Verse 20, we see the ram with 2 horns, right? 2 horns, one was Medes and one was Persians, right? And this is the empire that lasted for 213 years. And the third empire, which was of belly and thighs of bronze. The first one was gold, the second one was silver, that dream that he saw. The third one was the belly and the thighs. It was made of bronze. Which empire was that? Yeah, the Greeks. Remember the man called Alexander the Great? Yes. He took over and he reigned from 336 BC. And this kingdom was also mentioned as beast and leopard with 4 heads, because we don't know what happened. Alexander only reigned for 2 years. After that, his kingdom was divided into 4. 4 of his top generals divided the kingdom that Alexander had built, and 4 of them, one's name was Ptolemy, another is Antipater, another is Seleucus, and Antigonus. These 4 generals divided his kingdom, and they started to reign. So they were also mentioned in the Bible. In Daniel chapter 7 verse 6, it says, the beast, the leopard with 4 heads. And also mentioned in chapter 8, the male goat with large horn and 4 smaller horns. The large horn, of course, we know is Alexander the Great. The smaller four horns are the four generals who took after his death, which reigned on. Now, at the end of this, there was the fourth kingdom, which we see in history was the Roman kingdom. Now, it started off with BC 27, which is mentioned as the two legs of iron in that Daniel's dream, right? Or in the 7th chapter, we see the beast with teeth of iron and 10 horns. We saw in the study of Revelation that this kingdom is going to be revived in the end times. This Roman kingdom, which was there as a fifth kingdom, as a fourth kingdom, is going to be revived, right, in the latter days. That's when we see 10 kings coming up and all we studied in Revelation, right? But in that two legs of iron, we see that the Roman kingdom, which spanned almost till the 3rd or 4th century, now we saw that's the time when Christ came. You remember when you read the Gospels very clearly, in the beginning, when you see who was the Caesar who reigned? Augustus Caesar. Right? Augustus Caesar was the man in charge of Rome and all the subsequent places when Jesus Christ was born. Right? So, we see that the great prophecy that Jesus Christ was born in a particular place. Which place was that? Bethlehem. It was written in the book of Micah, chapter 5, that Bethlehem Ephrathah, though you are a very small place, the king is going to reign, will come from that place. But remember, Mary was full pregnant with Jesus, and where was she? In Nazareth. Where was Nazareth? 110 miles away from Bethlehem. Right? At that time, no aircraft, no car, no bus, nothing. But God used this man. Which man? Augustus Caesar, to write an edict that each person should go to his hometown to register their name in the census where he was. So God used this man, and Joseph, along with his fully pregnant woman Mary, had to travel because Jews won't cross across Samaria. They had to cross the Jordan all the way around about and then go to Bethlehem. By the time she came, labor pain started, and we know what happened, right? Jesus was born in. Otherwise, for all probability that Jesus would have been born in, but word of God cannot go wrong, right? So God used this man, Augustus Caesar, the first Roman emperor, who reigned from 31 BC to 14 AD. Then we know that he died, and the next person who started was Tiberius Caesar. About him also we read in the Bible. Where do we read? About Tiberius Caesar. In the 2nd chapter of Luke, right? When Luke is a very, very methodical historian, and he is trying to place the ministry of John the Baptist in this context, and subsequently the ministry of Jesus as well, right? So he says in Luke chapter 2, in the 15th year of Tiberius Caesar, John the Baptist came preaching the message of repentance in the Judean desert. Okay, so Tiberius Caesar reigned from 14 AD to 37 AD. So that's a time when Jesus did his ministry, but very little, even though Jesus knew about Tiberius Caesar, not much proof in the Bible or from extra biblical sources that Tiberius Caesar knew much about Jesus during that time, right? Because the Roman Empire was so vast that this place, Judea and Galilee was a tiny little speck in the whole. Like for example, if Narendra Modi does he know what is happening in Calicut? That would be the tiny little speck in the whole of country India, right? Just like that, Roman Empire was so vast that Galilee and it's kind of a small place. Of course, if there's something big happens, they will know, of course, but we don't have any clue. And there, after his death in AD 37, there is a man called Caligula who came from 37 to 41. He was a mad ruler. He was really out of his mind. And he went to the extent by saying that my horse is also a general. he was so out of his mind. And one of the people inside killed it. And there came another man, the fourth made a Caesar called Claudius. Now, Claudius is also mentioned in the Bible. These are all Caesars. Claudius is mentioned in the Bible in Acts chapter 18. It's regard to an incident that happened during the reign of Claudius. Maybe it's instructive to read that. Acts chapter 18, verse 1. Now, what really happened? Now, why did I say all this? Because to give you a context in which Christianity came to Rome. How did Christianity come? Because we know that Apostle Paul did not go to Rome. Jesus did not go to Rome. Peter did not go to Rome. We don't see any of the apostles going to Rome and preaching the gospel. Then how did gospel ever reach the Roman Empire or the Roman capital, where Italy is? The most that Apostle Paul went was up to Macedonia, which is the modern day Greek. Italy is much west than the modern day Greek, and we know that no known apostle had gone to Rome. So then how did gospel reach Rome? One clue is in Acts chapter 2. Acts chapter 2, we read that on the day of Pentecost, there were people from all the Roman colonies where the Jews were scattered. Jews were business people. Even today, we see Jewish businessmen at Buddha business activity. Even they came to Cochin here, doing wonderful business for the last 2,000 years. Many countries, they are leading businessmen, Rothschild and all the big guys, big names you remember, Jewish names. Okay. Well, so they went to different places. You remember this lady called Lydia, businesswoman, selling dye, purple, right? And she was flourishing in the town of Philippi. Okay, so these people have gone to many places as business people, but remember the Old Testament, the Jews always remember that 3 times in a year they want to come to Jerusalem, and the Passover feast was one of them. And people from all over the place, they came to Jerusalem, and they were there at the day of Pentecost. And we saw Jews and proselytes from Rome had also come to Jerusalem. And what happened on the day of Pentecost? You know, right? The Holy Spirit came in big measure. They start speaking in tongues, and Peter was preaching the gospel on the Pentecost day, and on the day of Pentecost, and we heard the 3,000 people. So one of the possibility that these people who had come from Rome, these Jews who had come from Rome, they heard Peter preach, took the message to their heart, got baptized, and went back as believing Christians starting the church. Right? That could be one possibility. We are not sure, but I am just giving you a possibility. Another also reason, if you see in the Acts chapter 8, we see that the first martyr called Stephen, right? Stephen was martyred, and then because of the martyrdom of Stephen, what happened? There was a great persecution among Christians, and they were scattered, right? They were scattered. They went from place to place and place to place, and we see that they came to Antioch, and from there they were named Christians, and possibly some of these believers might have also gone to Rome. So we see that by AD 35 or 33 or 34, after the death and the resurrection of Jesus, after 50 days, maybe within a year, this church started in Rome. So we see on whose So by the end of Tiberius Caesar, Jews were the first Christians in the Roman Church. They were the only Christians because we know that the gospel was not preached to Gentiles. We know Roman world, the majority of them were Gentiles. But we know that only Jews formed the early first church, right? And Jews were maybe they might have shared the gospel, we don't know. But first we know that gospel was shared to Gentiles in the house of Cornelius. That's how the Bible records. So we can safely assume that majority of the believers in that church were Jewish. Now, we know that when the gospel was taken to Jews, not all Jews accepted the gospel. What happened to others? They were fighting, just like Apostle Paul, right? When they heard the gospel and then they heard about Jesus of Nazareth, they were so enraged and they started persecuting. And even that happened in Rome, right? The Jewish Christians and the Jewish non-Christians, they started to have trouble because they were all staying. There were approximately, historians say that there is around 40,000 to 50,000 Jews living in one particular area, and when there is people saying that Jesus Christ is Lord and the other person saying that no, Jesus Christ is only a man, what will happen? Jagada ho jayega. So when they started to fight with each other, this Emperor Claudius said, "Out you go! All of you, get out from here." From where? That's what you read in Acts chapter 18. He ordered all the Jews to go out of Rome. And in that group, there was a couple by the name Aquila and Priscilla. Looks like you're not familiar with that passage. Let's read that passage. Acts 18, 1 to 4. Okay, in that place, so quickly we can read.
After these things, Paul departed from Athens and went to Corinth, and he found a certain Jew named Aquila, born in Pontus, who had recently come from Italy with his wife Priscilla, because Claudius had commanded all the Jews to depart from Rome.
40,000 Jews, out you go, he said. No more trouble here. You want to make trouble? Go out of Rome and fight. He was not much interested in either group. So there was a vacuum in the church of Rome. At that time, Gentile Christians, they began to come even during their time. And then now all the Jews are out of Rome. Now the church has become completely Gentile. Right? But before long, this man died, Claudius died, and there was another emperor who came, who it was. His next Caesar is Nero. Nero came from AD 54. And immediately when he came, he saw that the business establishment and all were going bad in Rome. And he said, all guys, you come. Come back. All of you, now you are free to come back. So, all of these people came back to Rome. Now, when Paul was writing this letter, these Jewish Christians were already come back, but still, predominantly, this Roman church was Gentiles. If you read Romans carefully, you will see that he's addressing to Gentiles primarily. When you read Romans, you see. Why? Because there was a majority there. Now, what's the problem? Now, the small problem started here. Gentiles, while the Jews were away, they were now thinking, these Jews rejected Jesus, the Jews killed Jesus, so now God has rejected the Jews. Now we people are the ones who are accepted by God. God has done away with the Jews. His program with the Jews are over. So now God has accepted us. So now this conflict has started. Now when they have come back, they are dealing with this problem. What's the problem? Now this is shifted. There is something called, I've spoken to you about this while I was teaching Revelation. This is called replacement theology, right? They were thinking that God has done away with Jews. Now God has replaced Jews with all others. Now God's program with Jews is over. Now Paul's so that's why I labored on this so far is Paul's primary reason for writing Romans. Many of them think is to write doctrine. Yes, it was, but it is also to deal with this major problem. He deals with that from chapter 9 to chapter 11. 3 chapters he's dedicating in this to talk about God's righteousness, maybe his relationship with Israel. Right? So, this is one of the major things we need to keep in mind. This is the first primary context in which he is writing this letter. If you know many of the other letters of Apostle Paul, they were written for 2 of these reasons. Number 1, some letters were dealing with issues in the church, right? For example, Corinthians, they were having an issue, a lot of problems. They were writing to him about marriage. They were written to him about adultery. So many things they have written. So Romans was not that. Some letters, Galatians, right? It's an issue that they were saying that this Judaic practices also should be included along with Christian practice, Christian faith. So Paul was trying to deal with that particular issue. That's one thing. Second reason that he has written letters is for people. Some, he's dealing with certain issues of people. Like Timothy, for example, he's writing to Timothy and Titus. He's telling him to go and appoint elders in every city and so on. So many letters are given, but this letter is written primarily to what is the predominant theme of this book? Is a knowledge of our God and about the Christian world. Okay. So this book Romans is in fact, if you read the last chapter of Romans, you see that it was not just sent to Romans, it was sent to other churches as well. Because Paul knew that very soon he is going to leave this world. But he wanted to leave a treatise with all churches, so that this is a kind of a systematically written book. We need to think through this book, and everything concerning our salvation is embedded into this book. Okay? Many people build on wrong foundations. What's the problem with building on wrong foundation? As you build up, so what is the solution? Paint, little plastering and paint. This is what happened in Christianity. They thought that what's wrong with Christianity was, only they saw some cracks, so they tried to put up and plaster it. And again some crack came here. Again until people like Martin Luther saw that that's not the problem with the crack. It's not the problem with the painting. It's the problem with the foundation. So you have to bring the whole thing down and say, down with this whole hierarchy and the whole system that you deal. Everything is wrong because justification is not by works, it is only by the whole building crashes, and that is why even today the Catholic system is against Protestant system. Why? Because they think that their hierarchy and their works all will stand them in good stead. That is not the case. And he came, and rightly so, from Romans he understood that a man is justified not by any of his works, but by faith alone, and God gives his righteousness to us. So this word, God's righteousness, that's repeated more times in Romans than in any other. So the key verse of Romans is Romans 1, 16, 17. Can you read that quickly? Romans 1, 16, 17.
Not ashamed of the gospel of God, for it is the power of God to salvation for everyone who believes, for the Jew first and also for the Greek. For in it, the righteousness of God is revealed from faith to faith, as it is written, the just shall live by faith.
Apostle Paul is building the theme of his book in this verses. He says, the gospel, which means good news. Good news is what? He's not ashamed of the good news. Why? Why is he not ashamed? Because this is the power, dynamite, right? Dynamite does not mean destruction. It's a constructive power. It's a constructive power of God for what? Salvation. Right? The gospel is the power of God to salvation. Now we know that it cannot be taught from worldly thinking, because worldly thinking, salvation means what? Salvation means struggle. Salvation means fight. Salvation means war. If you are under the yoke of somebody, how can you come out of that yoke? Struggle of independence, haven't you heard? The American Civil War, haven't you heard? So many countries, they struggled. If you are under bondage of somebody, how will you come out? So worldly thinking is struggle, fight, strife, right? But the gospel is what? The righteousness of God imputed to us. What struggle from our side? Only put exercise of faith, right, upon the finished work of Christ, where He gives His righteousness to us. That is why it said God's righteousness, not man's righteousness. Very important. Very important. God's righteousness works and given to us. How? Begin by faith. So Christian life is an altogether act of faith, right? So that means even though we work, we do many things, all works which are not coming out of faith, they are called dead works. And Bible says you have to repent from dead works, right? So this is very important for us to understand. Some people think that salvation is by faith, but our life is by work. No. Our life also has to go on by faith. Because even the so-called works that we do, it should come out of what? Faith. Otherwise, all our works, they are dead works and not. Now the problem with Paul is dealing here, if you look in the first 3 chapters, before a person can put his faith upon Jesus Christ, now there are doctors sitting here, or if you go to hospital, first they will take a pad and write medicine. What they will do? It's a foolish doctor. There's a doctor who will first write medicine. Some doctors do it. By the time they come from there, they start writing. Chala. One of our brother in Nepal, he had a heart pain. He had a pain in the chest. So he went to one of those compound doctors. So he said, "What's your problem?" So I have a chest pain, sir. No problem. And he go medicine. And these brothers, they used to take medicine from here for small things like and he saw this prescription is written. It's a prescription for worms in the stomach. This brother said, I prayerfully ate that and all the chest pain. Yeah, so many wonderful things happen in Nepal. No, this is not happening here. Anyway, so first thing is to find out what your problem is. Right? Without that, you should not give medicine. Right? So Paul is actually taking a little time to tell them what is your problem. Right? So without a problem, even when we share the gospel, if a person is not realizing that he is a a sinner, then what can we tell them? What is left? We can tell about Jesus, we can all that, but will that have any effect? Not immediately. Till the time that he realizes that he says, so Paul is taking a good amount of time in explaining, because there are two groups of people here, as I told you. Who are they? Jews and Gentiles. Now they have two different problems, right? Gentiles, for Gentiles, they don't have any law, they don't have anything. Anything is good enough. If you go to people, do they have any morality? Gentiles. No. So, Paul is addressing that problem. So they might say, oh, you guys are Jews, you got the Bible with you, you got the Old Testament, that is why you can believe in God. We don't have anything. So why are you blaming us? Some people ask the same question today. What happens to that deep jungle in Africa who never heard the name of Jesus? Paul is saying, hold on. I tell you, God has left a witness for them too. Now, which jungle in Africa has not seen the sun? Which jungle in Africa has not seen a tree? Which jungle in Africa a person has not breathed the air? So, one of my friends, his name is Ray Wenger, 9 children. His eldest daughter is a Bible translator in one of the remotest tribes in Africa. So, she was translating. She's a Hebrew scholar, and she was translating the Bible into their language. And she was asking these people who are not educated, very deep inside the African forest. He was asking them. There are some people in my country, she was just saying, who doesn't believe in God. Really? They were asking. How can that be? Can't they see this? Can't they see the tree? Can't they see the animal? Can't they see the complex? How can they say that there is no God? These people, they never heard the name of Jesus. They never got the Bible. Now they are saying that, so they're saying, oh, probably they are ignorant people. No, she said, no, they are scientists. Scientists. Oh, really? Oh, I can't understand. They are saying. Tribal people, they are saying, we cannot understand how anyone can say that there is no God. It needs a lot of faith. Lot of faith to say that there is no God, because it's so evident. To say our dear brother sitting here and to say he is not there, how much of faith I need? I need to close my eyes. I need to close everyone's eyes. I have to close my ears. So many things I have to do to believe that our brother Simon is not here. How difficult, how easy to believe he is here. Correct? It's so easy to believe in God, so difficult to believe that there is no God. So those tribal people were saying, putting the scientists to shame. Right? So, in that Romans chapter 1, he talks about this. Say, look, you, those who are, you man, he's saying, he's telling to everyone, right? That God has given his proof right from the beginning about what? About his invisible powers, right? We know that Johnny Ive is not here. Who is Johnny Ive, you may ask. Okay? But Johnny Ive is the designer of iPhone, okay? He's not here. But if you use iPhone, right, he speaks volumes because it is his design that you see. One of the finest designers in the world today of electronic products. He designed iPhone 5 and so many other Apple machines. So, everyone will try to see. We are not seeing him, but it's not necessary. He says the invisible power of God is revealed to us through what? Right? A Coca-Cola bottling plant is one of the most efficient kind of machinery in the world, working without having a stop. But even that fails after 1 or 2 years. Continuous work because 3 shifts. bottling, so vigorous. 103-year-old man's heart, how many years without storm, brother? Not 1 week stopping. Which design is better? Coca-Cola brand? Fantastic machine going on within us, right? So, God is trying to say, hey, you are a fool to say that you can't see me. And then, not only so this is a kind of argument that Apostle Paul is trying to make, right? First, from the talking to a person who says that I don't know Jesus, I don't know Jehovah God. No worry, you have the tree, you have the sun, right? You have the wind, you have your heart, you have your nose, right? That's a witness, and you should have searched for me. That's what he deals with. That. So in those chapters, he deals with first dominantly Gentile crowd, and then he goes to religious moralists in chapter 2. Right? He's talking about, who's a religious moralist? Who says that? You remember that man came to pray, 2 people came to pray. What was he saying? What was the man saying? Oh, look at this man. I pray 5 times. I fast. I give tithes. So you must let me in because of my morality. Because I follow religion, you should let me in. Today there are many people in India like that. I don't want your cheap gospel. I'm getting at 4:30, dipping myself in Ganga when you guys are sleeping. Once we remember, we were in Allahabad. Early morning, 4:30, our neighbor going with his wife to dip in the Sangam. He was surprised where these people are going early morning, 4:30. We started to go. So, religious people, they think that out of their religiosity or out of their routine, they can gain their. So, he says that you also will be judged according to your morality because your heart, in your conscience, I have written a law. Right? You guys are very smart in doing what you want to get into, but you never, you do wrong things, wicked things, you act wickedly, you think wickedly, and you are keeping to yourself the wrath of God. So if I want to take your moral deeds, right, Bible says in the Old Testament, all your bad works are like filthy rags. Good works. Not bad works. You think our bad works are filthy rags, we can understand. But the Bible says your good works are like filthy rags. Why did he say your good works are like filthy rags? Because where is it coming from? Our heart is very wicked. Right? And out of that comes good works. So-called good works, all mingled and messed with a leper buying a laddu, trying to buy and give to you. Why we have hesitation, all blood and ooze coming up in his hand, and then trying to take that and give. Right? All comes from this corrupted heart of ours. It says, all your morality will not stand. Good people can't go to. You think that good, no, because there is none good but somebody said, no, good master, what shall I do? Why are you calling me good? There's only one. If you call me good, you must consider me as your master. Right? There is none good than God. So, you can't. So, that is he dealing with the religious moralist in the second chapter. Then he goes on to another group in chapter 2, verse 17. He talks to the specific guys called Jews. So what is Jews' peculiarity? They are having, we are not like other people. We are not like Gentiles. We are not like the religious moralists, like the Buddhists or the Hindus or even. We have the law. Moses, do you know who he was? He saw God face to face. We have the revealed word of God to us. Prophets, where did they come from? All our prophets. Apna Jatwala. They were doing like that. So to them, Apostle Paul says, my friends, don't do like that. You too are condemned because the law was given to you. How many of you are able to keep the law? What is happening to your life? You are doing everything on the outside, especially to those religious crowd in that Jewish faith. But inside you, all kinds of wickedness. You keep, when you put mustard, they throw mustard into the oil, 10 mustard they throw, they keep one aside. Right? I think they were very particular. Oh, 10 I threw, one I threw aside. Such care you take in giving tithe, then you go and loot the houses of widows. You charge them extra when you lend money to them. Right? God is not accepted. So, and then when he comes to chapter 3, he says, all have sinned and, remember that? All chapter. So he is telling you guys, Gentiles, and you, religious moralists, the Jews, all have sinned and come short. So now, if all have sinned and come short of the glory of God, now he portrays the problem. This is the problem. Now, how to come out of this? Now, this is again, people, when they see that they are naked, just like Adam and Eve did, we also do. What did Adam and Eve do when they saw that they were naked? Whatever is getting, we get covered. So what they did, they took the leaves. Leaves was plenty available there. They tried to say, oh, leaves are very nice leaves, green leaves. I look beautiful in this. What happened when the sun came? What happened when the wind came? Just like that. We think that leaves can these things that we stitch them. Whatever we make is enough to cover our nakedness before God. That is not possible. In fact, Adam and Eve tried that. It's not. So God had to do something. What did God do? So God saw that it is not possible for these guys to cover themselves. Each effort what they do will be a worthless effort. So God killed an animal, took the skin and broke them. So now you go confidently. Why? It's kind of a picture that God had to give His righteousness to cover us. When we try to cover us with our own righteousness, it is like this leaves. Right? After some time, it will dry off and it will go and we will feel completely naked. So man's effort to cover himself is very. Today also people do like that. They do something, they want to do something, charity. They will, by the way, who is the biggest givers of charity today? Can you tell me? Tell me, who is the biggest, supporters of charity? Underworld people. Huh? You ask the charities. Underworld people, they are the biggest donations. Why they are donating? They killed many people. They made many wives widows. They made many children orphans. They can't sleep. They made crores and crores of rupees by looting and killing and murdering and all that. Now they are trying to. They know that they are wicked and naked, and God is. So they want to do something to cover themselves. So what they do? 10% or 20% of what they gained, they give it to this kind of trying. No, it's no use. Because before God, everything is. God says you don't no need to cover all it. I see your nakedness and your wicked and wretched and everything. You come to me, I will give you my cover. Then you can be. This is a church in Church of Philadelphia, who also thought like that. I am rich, I am beautiful, I am powerful. He said, forget about your richness. You are poor, you are wretched. You take from me, you buy from me. That's what he was trying to say, right? So again, we see that the righteousness needed, we see in the first two chapters, both for Gentiles as for Jews and the religious moralists. And when we come to chapter 3, we see the righteousness of God imputed to us. Now, this is a wonderful concept, right? No religion could think of this. Today, if you go and ask any religion, how can you go to moksha? What will they say, brother? Go punya, go this, go puja, go, pilgrimage. Whether you were also once upon life. What were the things that you used to do in that temple of your village? Yeah? They cut the bakri once in a year. They do all kinds of things to, try to be right with God. Now, this is the constant desire of man to get right with God. Today, you see the struggle. You go in the train, many times we have gone to Allahabad, and these people from the south, they go, they are all rich and educated people sitting next to us. Where are we going? Why? Sangam. They think that they can somehow want to get right with God, but no one could think of this way. Only God could think. What is that? Never can any man, by any method, on his own way, can get right with God by himself. God has to do something. Right? This is where we understand that God's righteousness imputed to us is a comfort and sole reason of how we can go to heaven. Actually, God's righteousness, what does righteousness mean? According to God's righteousness, what He should do to us? Because Martin Luther mentions in one of his preface to Romans, he says, I once upon a time thought that God's righteousness is something that I should fear. Why? Because if He is right, what He should do to me as a sinner? Punish me. If I am guilty and I am taken to the court, what am I fearing? If this man is a righteous judge, then what he will do to me? Should I fear or not? The judge. I will fear. Why? Because if he is a righteous judge, what he will do to me? He will punish me to the maximum of what I have done. He will not let me go. So, righteousness of God, Martin Luther says, I thought once upon a time that it was something to be feared. But he realized that this same righteousness of God through Christ, and He suffered on the cross, now there is a possibility that through that righteousness we could be made righteous. Oh, he said that is not something to be feared now. Today I love it. Because through Christ He has become God's righteousness. He suffered the righteous punishment which was supposed to be on me, and now today God is giving His righteousness to us, and we may be declared saints. No human philosophy can think about this. Only God could have thought about this. Okay. So we see the description of righteousness in chapter 3, the end of chapter 3. Fourth chapter, Romans, talks about the righteousness illustrated through the life of this great man of the old called Abraham. So, illustration of righteousness in chapter 4. Go home and read. I request you to read Romans before you come next week, because from next week onwards we are going to talk in details. Today I am just putting you from a bird's eye view of the book of Romans, but maybe God willing, next week we will go into greater detail of Romans. So please read and if possible memorize Romans. So illustration of righteousness that we see in Romans chapter 4, because it talks about how Abraham was made justified before God. In the 5th chapter, we see the benefits of righteousness. What is the benefit to me if God has declared me to be righteous? Right? If you remember, being justified by faith, we have what? We have, see, this is the primary benefit of being proclaimed righteous, that we have peace with God. Oh, it's amazing, right? The greatest gift that a person can get in this world is not money. It is getting peace. Because if he has got peace with God for eternity, he is secure. Right? Because he is in union. He is living in life. Because Bible explains life in union with God. What is the opposite? Disconnected means the Bible says. So, a man who is living in a disconnected life with God, what is he living? What kind of life is he living?
Dead life.
He is going in Mercedes Benz. But who is he going? Who is he? Dead man. What is the use of putting a corpse in a Mercedes Benz? Any use? No use. He is like a corpse going in a Mercedes Benz. That's all. Putting on raiments or whatever. He is a corpse. He is declared or is considered as a dead man. The greatest benefit of being the righteousness of God is that we have peace with God. So he moves on and says in verse 12 to 21, the applicability of righteousness. Where can it apply in our day-to-day life? How is it applied? Right? In there we say, because of his righteousness, we can now live in the newness of the power. Newness, the applicability of righteousness. Okay? Now, when he spoke about those two things, he is taking about two questions in chapter 6 and chapter 7. Right? Chapter 6 talks about the question of license. Right? So some people say, as the Muslims say today, for your religion, very funny. Because you say that you call upon Jesus, all your sins will be forgiven. So, what if somebody calls upon Jesus and keep on sinning and again calling upon him, again sinning? Easy way. License. So, he opens the 6th chapter and says, so because grace is abounding and because sin abounds, grace abounds more, can we keep on sinning? As the Muslims ask. He says, okay. God forbid. So he is dealing with that Christian who truly understands justification and how that God has given his righteousness to us. Will never live like that. No. And he explains why. Why not? Those who have been identified with his death, and then he says identified with his life, they will try to live in the newness of life. They put to death the old man. All that is explained in chapter 6. 7 is dealing with another question. What is that question? The question of legalism, law. Right? These are two extremes in which Satan binds people today. One, he puts people in the, because Jesus died for me, I can do what I want. The other extreme is legalism. What is legalism? Legalism is you bind yourself to the law. Right? Bind yourself to the law. And when you put yourself in that kind of condition, what happens? You can't move. You are like that. Right? Should not look. Should not touch. Christianity becomes a list of do's and don'ts. Become rules. So when Christianity is converted to rules, what happens? Rules and regulations try to begin. You can't.
Condemnation.
You come under condemnation. You're always living under fear. So these are the two extremes in which believers. So he's saying that, okay, he's dealing with chapter 6, license, what to do with that. In chapter 7, what to do with legalism. Is that the way? At least in the middle says, who will save me? Right? He's crying. And then, chapter 8 comes about the liberty of the Spirit. One of the wonderful chapters of Romans in the New Testament, chapter 8, where you have the liberty of the Spirit. Where he says, there is a new world between these two. Don't have to go for license. Keep on sinning. Don't have to go to this extreme either. Now there is a liberty of the Spirit in which you can serve God. Right? A freedom. Yeah, freedom to serve God. Now, what is freedom? This is something that we need to understand. Some people say that you guys don't have any freedom. We have the freedom to smoke. We have the freedom to watch movies. We have every freedom. Is that freedom? That's slavery. Right? Why? Because after some time you have to keep on. If a person is a glutton, right? Even if he doesn't want to eat, his stomach will say, "Hey, get up, take the money and go to bros." Now, who is the master here? Stomach. His master is stomach. He will say, "Yes, sir." And he takes money, take the bite, go to roast, fill up the stomach. Who is the master? So he says, freedom is what? What is the freedom for a bird? Freedom for a bird means what? So the bird is saying, I have every freedom in keep on walking. Is that freedom? Birds are supposed to fly. We are saved for what? If that is not there, then there is no freedom. If there is no freedom to live in the liberty of serving God, then that's slavery again. So these two extremes, the Paul deals with. See how wonderfully he is building up his case in chapter 8. So we know chapter 9 and 10 and 11, he talks about righteousness and relationship with his people Israel. Chapter 9 talks about Israel's past. What happened to Israel's past? Because of their disobedience to God, even though all these wonderful things were given to them, they were reduced to a remnant. Right? Because of their unfaithfulness to the revealed will of God. So, he's talking about the past, Israel's past in chapter 9. Now, in chapter 10, he's talked about Israel's present. What is the present condition of Israel? What was the present condition at the time when Paul was writing this? They were hardened. Right? They were hardened to the gospel. Right? They were rejecting Jesus. Jews, even today, they are one of the hardest people in the world to reach out to Christ. Why? So close, but so far away. They have the Old Testament. But you see, few, now it is coming up to others, but it's very difficult to reach out to Jews. Right? They're harder. So it's talking about them, their present condition in chapter 10. Chapter 11 talks about the future restoration of Israel. It says, God has not cancelled them. One day, God is going to get them back. Right? The future restoration. We saw that a little in Bible study in Revelation. So, chapter 9, 10, 11 talks about the past, present, and future of Israel. So, in fact, why did he say this about? He's telling those people there in the Church of Rome, hold on. Don't write them off. Right? He prays for them. God will going to bring them. God has brought you both together to become a church. He has divided the central line. And now He has joined you both, Jew and Gentile, to make one church. Right? So don't write them off. God has got a plan for them. God has not replaced you with them. God has got a plan. Hold on. Live in unity. This is the message that is trying to put in chapter 9, 10, and 11. Chapter 12 onwards is talking about the practicality of righteousness. Now, how righteousness looks like, God's righteousness in our life looks like in daily, day-to-day activity. Now, if you read from chapter 12, you see this righteousness is revealed in relationships. Right? We know our behavior comes when we relate to people. When you're sitting all alone in the room, no one knows what kind of person you are. Correct, David? When you start talking to people, I know. So in relation with, so it talks, chapter 12 verse 1 and 2 talks about righteousness revealed to oneself. How you present your body as a living sacrifice. Next 6 verses in chapter 12 talks about our relationship with the church. What are the gifts that God has given to us? How we can use those gifts. Then he talks about our relationship with society, right? In this world, how to show love to one another, how to show kindness to other people. This is something that he is describing from the remaining chapters, verses of chapter 12. Coming to chapter 13, he talks about our relationship with the government, right? Some people say, we will not pay tax. No. Caesar will be a bad man. But you also pay your taxes. You don't care what they do with your taxes. But you submit to them. right? Something that we say. Coming to chapter 14, Paul talks about your relationship with respect to others. Now, there's a problem. Jews and Gentiles together in one church, they are having this common meal. What happens in the common meal? Somebody will bring some dietary things. So you'll say, no. Pork? No. And all kinds of trouble started. And then for Gentile, they only heard the gospel. Gospel did not say that you should not eat pork or something. Gospel was, you are a sinner, Christ died for your sins. So they said, what is pork? What is the trouble that you are making about pork? We've been eating, but nobody told us not to eat. So the Jews said, no, you go to Old Testament. So they were creating trouble about what to eat. Also about certain days. They were keeping the Sabbath, 6th day. So they said, those who shared the gospel never told about such a day. What day you are talking about? What Sabbath? Well, we come together to worship God, I know that. But why do you want to keep certain, you should not work and all that? So this was creating issues. So Paul is saying, hello, please hold on. No, be kind. Don't judge. Right? So your righteousness should be practically manifested in these areas, not only in theology. Right? When you sit and come for the meal, don't try to judge one another. Right? If you don't want to eat, don't eat. But don't judge another person who is eating. And you guys who are not eating, don't judge those who are eating. So you be kind to one another. So practical measures, he is saying, the righteousness of God in practical ways. Okay. So he talks about days, special days, and the meat things, and then when it comes to chapter 15, Paul talks about imitating Christ. Okay. Now he says he has given us a good example. All of that he's saying. And then finally he concludes with his plan. What is he planning to do? Because now he's writing this from Corinth. Now he's thinking he has never visited Rome. He said, I am planning to visit you on my way to Spain. He had plans, right? Do we have plans 5 years down the line? What are you going to do? He had. He kept his plans ready, but God had other things to do. But he had his plan. He said, I will go take the gospel to Spain. On the way, I plan to visit you. Well, he had his misgivings. He says, I am afraid I'm going to Jerusalem. Maybe those guys will create trouble for me. Please pray that I'll be saved from those people and able to see you, he says in chapter 15. Chapter 16, he sends some personal messages to two people there. It ends with some admonition and benediction. One of the longest books, letters he has written. So well structured, to the point. I believe the study of Romans will help us to have a greater understanding of the plan.